Welcome to LAA Podcast Special Series dedicated to celebrating the International Association of Law Enforcement Intelligence Analysts, or IALEIA's 40th year anniversary. This series will cover a variety of topics, including the history of the association, what current local chapters are doing, the certification, training, the future of the association, and much more. Please join us in congratulating the members of the association, and let's jump into this episode where we can hear from some of the most influential members.
Thank you for joining me. LAA Podcast presents a special series dedicated to the IALEIA 40th anniversary. Today, we are talking about the certification process. With me today, I have two individuals who've worked with the certification committee, Kathy Lichay and Ed Feingold. I also have two IALEIA members who have recently completed the certification and want to give their perspective. Kathy, we'll start with you. Can you give us a brief introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Jason. My name is Kathy Lichay. I've been the Professional Standards Director with IALEIA for the last 2 years, but a member of IALEIA since 2006. Been on various committees with chapters in Illinois and Arkansas. Have about 20 years, though, of law enforcement experience at the federal, local, and private sector levels.
Okay. Ed?
Good afternoon. Ed Feingold, just retired from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Been an IALEIA member since the early 90s and held a couple of positions within the hierarchy as wards chairman and certification. Started out my career 44 years ago, 1976, with the Defense Intelligence Agency. Moved on to the state of Arizona, the State Gang Task Force, and then moved on to ATF, where I just retired end of December.
Okay. And Alex?
Hi, my name is Alex Gulde. I currently work for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I have about 20 years of public sector experience, about 10 of those years as an analyst with two different state law enforcement agencies. I currently work as a policy and planning special projects coordinator for the department, but I just finished a 3-year stint as the program administrator for law enforcement analyst training at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Very good. And then Lauren.
Thanks, Jason. My name's Lauren. I work for the Calgary Police Service, so that's in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. I'm a strategic crime and intelligence analyst. I've been in this profession since about 2013 in a combo of private and public sector roles. I've only spent 2.5 years in the law enforcement section of this industry, and I'm just a recent SCCA certified analyst. That was just March of this year.
Okay, very good. So let's get into a little bit of the history of the certification process. Ed, this certification first started with the Society of Certified Criminal Analysts back in 1990. It eventually did merge in with IALEIA. And so since you let us know that you've been around since 1990, can you give us some perspective on what this initial certification was, what the feeling was, what they were trying to get at, goals and whatnot?
Sure. Well, IALEIA needed a certification program. They didn't have one internally, but IALEIA members started the Society of Certified Criminal Analysts, SCCA. And that certification in the early 90s, went through 2006. It was looking to elevate the career field of intelligence and analysis. And back in the 90s, we didn't have as many analysts, certainly, as we've had after 9/11. And the standards were fairly high. Most of the people who were taking the examination to become a certified analyst actually failed the exam the first time around. It wasn't meant to be an easy exam. It was meant to raise the bar of analytics. And it was an international effort. Matter of fact, one of the folks that received the regular certification received his diploma from Prince Charles back in 1996. So, and I remember sending one to a military man in Venezuela and had to send the exam certified to his commanding officer to be able to take that test. So it was an international effort. It did have iterations of it. So as we progressed towards 2006 and in merging with IALEIA, which if you want me to, I can go ahead and talk about the process if you want.
Yes, please. The question that I have right now is how much it changed when it was SCCA compared to today with the certification with IALEIA.
Yes, there was 100 multiple choice and true false questions. And the SCCA exam is the first part. And if you could pass that, which was a passing grade of a 70, then you had multiple pieces of information and intelligence provided to you. And you had to write a intel report on the findings you were able to expand out of that information. And so we were able to then see how you look at data, how you pull out the relevant information, some of your writing skills, so we can see how you can put it into writing. So it was a two-part. And it stayed that way through the entire time I was with SCCA. When it got turned over to IALEIA, it went through several iterations of changes until what you see today that Kathy will talk about, because we had to bring in different aspects of it, and different people have different perspectives of what they wanted to raise the bar to and what it was that they wanted to get out of the applicants for this exam. So it started out with a lot of multiple choice questions and morphed into now where we're writing against specific things like the Intel cycle and so forth. So we have the different levels within certification that are different than the ones we had in SCCA. So there's more certification levels in the current format.
Yeah, Kathy, let's get you in here. From your perspective then, as they transitioned in 2006 with the merger and then till today, we certainly see more tiers. But I'm actually also curious to know, the reason multiple choice questions are usually given in an exam is that they're pretty straightforward and easy to grade. When you get into writing, that can be a little bit subjective. So maybe talk a little bit about how the process of grading some of these written parts to the exam go.
Well, Jason, you do make a good point, and that's why we've established a certification committee, that we have a certification manager and then 3 analysts that have volunteered to be on this committee that help to look over the exams to help grade not just the essays, but the multiple choice as well. With regards to the essay piece, yes, there are multiple questions that the analyst must answer. And so for them, we have 3 or 4 different analysts that will be looking over the exam to help grade that. To avoid any conflict, the certification manager will go with the majority of what's been said based on a score sheet that we've all been required to put our scores in on that individual. And then once that's completed, it gets back to the professional standards director, myself, and then we'll let the analysts know if they've been accepted or they need to retake the exam.
I guess, Ed, just back to you real quick. Today, even at post 9/11, there's been lots of documentation. There was lots of training. I guess back in 1990, how did somebody prepare for the certification exam?
Well, we provided them a list of publications they needed to read. And as well, you have to have a certain amount of time as an analyst or in the intelligence field. And the questions that were going to be asked in the multiple choice questions are true and false, where a lot of it's going to come back from your own experiences. And how do you define that?
All right. And then I want to get into now why somebody would get certified. And we talked in the prep show that one of the aspects of law enforcement analysis certification is that there are various certifications out there. Certain states have them, certain associations have them, even some colleges and universities have their own certification. So I want to bring Alex and Lauren on now, and I'll start with Lauren. Lauren, why did you decide to get certified?
Yeah, so I've been an IALEIA member for, I'm not too sure, maybe 5 years or so. And I had taken the Foundations of Intelligence Analysis training. I knew that the certification recognized that coursework towards the SCCA certification. There were several analysts in my agency that are senior, very experienced, having worked in multiple areas of my organization, and they have the same certification. So I really reached out to them and asked them, of their thoughts on the certification process, if it seemed to be something worthwhile. Since they had career trajectories that I would very much like to emulate, I thought it would be a good decision for me. And I've also found that it's just integrated me more into the IALEIA community, which has been good. I'm on this podcast for that reason. And lastly, it was just about also for me achieving something professional development wise over that period. I try and set a goal for every 24 months to do something, to learn something new. And this was for 2020.
Good. And Alex, why did you get certified?
Yeah, so some of my reasons are similar to Lauren's. There's a personal achievement aspect to it. I continue to learn and study and challenge myself, and that was very much the same, actually. And it was a goal that I set to complete in 2020 to become IALEIA certified. But beyond that, it also had to do with my profession at the time. I was coordinating the law enforcement analyst training program at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and I'd previously become certified through the state of Florida in 2010 when I worked for another state agency as an analyst. But I felt that earning the IALEIA certification would give me additional credibility as a leader within this particular program, because I'm not a new analyst. I've actually, gone past working in analytical assignments and now working, sort of bigger picture area fields. But it always helped me to showcase my credibility, my achievement within the field. And now I serve as a mentor to younger analysts and so on. So maybe I think of it as a seal of approval that I have, and a quality assurance symbol, maybe, that maybe I do know what I'm talking about.
Very good. And then Kathy, because there are various options an analyst can make if they want to be certified, why should someone pick the IALEIA certification over maybe another certification?
So I look at IALEIA as the gold standard in the law enforcement community. We've been around for 40 years now. We are an international recognized professional organization. So I have found in my experience that when one finds out they're IALEIA certified, kind of heads turn. It's one credential that people do know of IALEIA, and they're proud to have that credential. I'd say too, going back to the benefit piece, having to testify in court. I'd love to have an analyst have that experience and that credibility established when testifying to say that they have been certified and have that credential. And I also say that too, for the employer piece, it helps to measure that analytical competency, right? And look at the experience of their analysts. It's helpful also in the hiring process to say that your analysts are certified.
Ed, do you have maybe a topic or a section of the certification that you think might be more important than others? Is there something, as you look at the certification process, that it's most important to have this part to the certification?
Well, I think going back to the SCCA portion to where we are today with the IALEIA certification, the trade craft has changed. We went from more of a paper and pencil type analyst to somebody that's using computers. To me, one of the things I wanted to find out from the analysts that I supervised is I didn't want them to become subject matter experts in the software. I wanted them to be subject matter experts in intelligence and analysis. And in some of the preparations to take an exam, it's to do really going back to your basic trade craft of what an analyst does. What is intelligence? What's the difference between intelligence and information? And there are analysts out there today that might be stuck into one particular portion of their trade crafts. For instance, they might just do telephone intercepts and not do other broad versions of the intelligence component. So in preparing for an exam like this, you have to start looking at the different publications that are on the website. For instance, I think there's one from a former CIA person who wrote The Psychology of Analysis, and looking at that, and you're getting a broader view of what the intelligence community and analytical community has today. Listen, you might not pass that exam right the first time around because you haven't had that exposure to it, but you'll do a lot better when you come around the second time if that's what needs to take place.
That just reminds me, Kathy, do you have stats on, I guess I don't even know how to ask the question, like how often do people fail the exam?
I won't say that it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say maybe about 75% success rate. Within the last couple of years, we had a few failures, but those analysts have tried to retake the exam.
Okay.
Or they're in the process of scheduling it.
And then I'll ask you the same question I asked Ed. Is there a piece of the certification process that you think holds more weight than some of the others?
No, I would just say, well, I think the essay piece is going to be the harder part for that analyst when taking the test, just because they have to really go back to their study materials and answer these particular specific questions going into the Intel cycle or various analytical methodologies. So it's that point where they are really focused in on going back to their experience level and their study materials to find out.
And Alex, what did you find to be the most difficult in terms of the exam?
That is an interesting question. I think I worry more about multiple choice because I'm an analyst after all, I tend to overthink sometimes. So I probably feel a little bit more intimidated by multiple choice parts of questions. I consider myself a pretty decent writer, and that's my preferred way of expressing myself. So I felt more comfortable with that aspect, to be perfectly honest.
And Lauren, same question. What did you find to be the most difficult about the certification test?
The writing portion was pretty natural for me. The multiple choice was difficult, and especially for me because I don't have a lot of tactical experience. There were some questions that I was just trying to guess based on a process of elimination because there are areas where I really haven't had experience yet. But I think overall it was pretty well-rounded, and I was able to lean into my experience to obviously get a passing grade.
And then Kathy, there are 3 different tiers to the certification, and a lot of this stuff can be found on the IALEIA website. The process, the preparation, how to apply, recommended readings. But let's talk a little bit in terms of the tiers.
Sure. Well, you have the basic analyst classification, and notice that it's a classification and not a certification, but it's the first tier into this program. It's designed for the new analysts, but it's not required. One could technically just apply directly to the CICA in lieu of the basic. But the basic, again, is just that entry level into the program.
And the basic is tied to the FIAT program. Is that correct?
There is a financial a discount if one has taken the FIAT, and they can apply for certification through the basic that way. Yes. Okay. The CICA then is the second tier, and that's in this particular tier, we're looking at that demonstrated experience from the analysts going into their training, their development, their analytical competency, right? And so these analysts have gained their practical experience in their careers. And it's at that point where the analysts would then not only apply, but they'll have to undergo an exam. And then the lifetime is the third tier of the program. So here is where the analysts at the lifetime level have achieved about 15 or more years of law enforcement or analytical experience. And they're considered a role model and a mentor at this stage.
Okay. So lifetime means that there's nothing after this. No more certification exams, correct?
No more certification exams, but after lifetime, there is another credential called the lifetime tenured that those analysts can apply for. It's good for the rest of their careers. It's for those that are in retirement status. So I've only issued one in my 2 years of being on the committee. That was just issued in the last 3 months.
So in order to keep any certification, you have to also keep your IALEIA membership. Is that true?
Yes, they need to be a regular member in good standing in order to keep their status active and to apply.
Kathy, is there anything besides what somebody might read on the website, or is there anything advice that you want to give to anybody in terms of applying or preparing?
Yeah, so sometimes I get asked what additional study materials can they look at besides what's already on our website. And so the best advice I was ever given was for those that have taken a FIAT or a similar 40-hour course is just to review those materials, because in that type of a course, they're going through those requirements, those methodologies, the entry-level subjects for those analysts to obtain. That would be my advice for those that are applying. And also, too, as far as study time, and Lauren and Alex might be able to to add to this, but I know a lot of analysts, when they're applying, they are incredibly nervous and they want to know how much time they need to prepare. I would say as long as you can articulate those answers to those questions, going back to your fiat materials, I would say maybe a month or two. If that, I didn't have a whole lot of time when I took my exam and I still passed on the first try, but I know a lot of people do get very nervous with taking any kind of test. So I would just say not to stress. You can always retake it if you didn't pass the first time, but it's a great opportunity to at least try and shoot out for.
Okay, and let's go back to Lauren then. Lauren, what advice do you have for someone who's thinking about going through the certification process?
So in terms of preparation, I was, fortunate to get some extra time in that I had selected a date to take the exam, and the paperwork didn't actually arrive in Canada until much after that date. It had to be resent. So I got some extra time to go through the materials. I think the materials laid out on the website can really prepare a candidate for the process and the certification. That being said, there is a lot there. There's several manuals that I had to kind of read through. Fortunately, I was able to skip some of the areas that I knew in depth already. And I just kind of focused where my experience wasn't. So my best recommendation would just be to really study those materials and talk to senior analysts. I did try and reach out to a couple of people who had recently been certified just to see what their experience was as well.
And then you, Alex?
So I tried to set up a study plan using the study materials that are on the website. And the one that really stands out to me that I found to be probably the most helpful book was really Criminal Intelligence for the 21st Century as a guiding book. I don't know if that's a true statement for all versions of the exam or just for the one that I took, but I felt that particular book prepared me the most for the version that I faced, and I was really pleased by that. So I set up a sort of a study schedule on weekends, trying to go through the recommended study materials. I also had the opportunity to retake a fiat class because I was tasked with evaluating a virtual presentation thereof as part of my job. So I actually consider that to be a review session that maybe not everybody can do, but I certainly benefited from that.
Okay. And then Ed, I don't want to leave you out here. Do you have any advice for the listeners if they're looking to get certified?
Well, I wholeheartedly support the fact that they should try to be a certified analyst. I think it'll help their career and their own self-image, as mentioned before. I think it's very important that we show professionalism in our career field because we're working with a lot of law enforcement officers that have no idea what intelligence analysis is. And if we show the professional side of who we are, then we get our street creds a lot easier and a lot more trust in the executives that we also support.
And then Kathy, what's next for the certification program? What can members expect?
So our committee's taking great strides with trying to update not only the exam, but also providing an established list of proctors, both internationally and nationally, so that analysts are not scrambling, trying to find somebody in their that may not be in their local AOR. We're also looking at trying to actually get more volunteers for various committees that pop up that are ad hoc committees for us. So in terms of, we are always looking for volunteers to help with the grading of the exams or to serve as a proctor, or to help us with certain projects that may come up throughout the year, such as updating our policy manual. So if you do have other analysts that would like to participate in that realm, we would love to have your support.
What email address should they use if they want to contact you?
Sure. They can use the professional standards email, which is professionalstandards@IALEIA.org.
Okay, good. And even with COVID and the pandemic, the certification test isn't online. Is that correct?
No, not at this time. There are some classes that are fiat approved that have gone online, but there are some clauses that there has to be some in-person classroom experience for those courses to count. We've gotten a lot of requests throughout COVID and even before then to go online, but at this time, we're just not there yet as an organization. Not to say that it won't happen, though.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, thank you all for joining me today and talking certification as we continue to celebrate IALEIA's 40th anniversary. I appreciate you being on your show, and you all be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. We'd like to thank IALEIA for the opportunity to work with them on this special series and our listeners for your continual support. Please check out our other work at leapodcast.com, and we'll see you in the next episode.